Hey, I'm Riggers, thanks for dropping in. Today I'd like to talk about a game I had a lot of fun playing last year, which is Fire Emblem Engage. Now this is, as of right now, the second newest entry in the Fire Emblem series, because I know the newest one came out in February. At least last year I heard it was coming out in February. I haven't actually heard a single thing about the game since then, but then I suppose the game isn't particularly spoken about in mainstream media, and they tend to talk about whatever the current controversies are, or the latest round of layoffs, and whatever the new live service game that's just been shut down after 5 seconds is. So I haven't been as following games in recent months because of various personal circumstances. However, I'm going to be talking today not about the new game, which I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but about Fire Emblem Engage. I'm not going to get out everything in the box, because we're not going to be doing an unboxing today, but I am going to sort of hold this and you can appreciate its art in general. I will also show you the steelbook though, and there's the back art. Not very interesting, but it does represent the game's emblems, the hero emblems, and there's the Divine Dragons one. Divine Dragon being the protagonist of two choosable genders here, and there's the spine. But onto the game itself. Fire Emblem, a quick rundown for people who maybe aren't familiar with the franchise, is a turn-based tactical strategy game where you go around a predetermined map, and each turn you can move your units a certain amount of squares depending on how far that unit is allowed to move. They have different abilities. They can, attack, defend, heal, use magic, teleport, support, all the different sorts of roles and moves you'd expect in the context of a fantasy setting, and with it being a role-playing game as well. And I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's turn-based combat. You have one unit attack another unit, then a little screen will come up and you'll see the units attacking each other, and you might have different objectives. Get A to point B and then the mission's over, or have a certain unit survive until a certain round, get a certain unit or several units to a certain part of the map. And all this sort of strategic, very addictive, very compelling gameplay, where you'll have to do a lot of trial and error, see what builds work, what units you'll have to train for certain jobs, and you build all this up in all your strategies, which units you want to travel to a certain part of the map, so who you want to deploy in which part of the map, and you take all this into account on what your units loadouts are going to be, what's the damage you're going to be like, who's going to carry all the potions, who's got what weapon where, and you can see how it gets addictive with all the different thoughts you have to think about. This particular game is the newest one I've played, because as I said, I've not played the absolute newest one, and the only other ones I've played much of, I completed all of Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS and several of its DLC chapters. I played a good chunk of Fates, and I've played maybe an hour or so of the very first Western localised Fire Emblem that was released on the Game Boy Advance, known to us just as Fire Emblem, but I think it was the 6th or so Fire Emblem game that came out. So Fire Emblem Engage, I'll just get the nice big box back out. Story-wise, it follows a character who wakes from kind of like a sleeping beauty. They're in like a comatose unconscious state for 2,000 years, I believe. I chose the metal one, so I'm just going to point to this guy. And it's called the Divine Dragon. And he awakes, and his mum, Queen Lumina, I think. It has been quite a few months since I played it. It was about last July, August I played it, and I've played quite a few things, and various things going on since then, so forgive any incorrect names. But you wake up, you reunite with the Queen, you meet her aides and the Royal Knights and blah blah blah. You end up going on big quests, as fantasy games tend to let you do, and you go to all the other different provinces and states and meet the other rulers and befriend and have various people from those lands travel with you, all to culminate against defeating some big bad evil who I can't remember the name of. Generic fantasy demon number 503, I don't remember. But the story for the most part is mediocre in terms of what it's trying to achieve and how it goes about it. The rulers of each kingdom are the most boring people ever and just sort of disappear from the story. And half of them are quite stupid as well. A failing of the Fire Emblem games and a limitation of how they work. The very nature of these games is, the older ones, it was a compulsory forced mechanic. Your characters can die and you have to, the pressure is on with your strategizing to make sure they live. In the newer games, I think Awakening on the 3DS was the first one to allow this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You can choose to play in classic mode where characters can permanently die, or I don't know, let's just say happy friendly mode where characters will only die for that battle. Like they'll just fall unconscious and they'll retreat and they'll have a bit of text coming up saying, oh no, I've run out of jelly babies, I need to go back to the shops, bye bye, and they'll just disappear off the map. So you've got that gameplay mechanic in place, which means the game can introduce characters, but then after a while those characters will stop appearing in cutscenes. They'll stop appearing and they'll disappear. And that is because of the nature of the fact that people can choose to have characters permanently die, so they can't have characters introduced in the story with any real impact, because the majority of them are able to die, theoretically, depending on the player's chosen mode. So that means a lot of the characters, while really interesting, are introduced only for short amounts of time as part of the story, and then they just disappear. And there's some characters who are completely optional, have absolutely no bearing on the story at all. So in terms of the story and narrative perspective, the majority of the best characters or most likeable characters, or whoever your favourite characters are, the majority of them are going to have no bearing on the story. And then the majority of the story characters who appear in the story cutscenes, even they get very little development because there's just so many characters. And then they aren't all that interesting. The main recurring ones are mostly quite boring. Apart from, let me just say, maybe just 2 or 3 of them, 4 of them maybe. The villain, I can't remember what she's called, but the villain with the horns, she was probably my favourite character in the game. She was really brilliantly played and acted, and the final scene in which she appears in the game was fantastic. Her final cutscene. I'm trying to spoil as little as possible about anything with any context. Well, actually, no, I suppose it wouldn't be her final scene, it'd be the penultimate cutscene she appears in. And then I suppose I can touch upon the DLC as well. The DLC was really cool. I preferred the DLC story a lot more. That had a lot more plot twists and what the fuck moments. The main characters, Nell and Nil, I found to be a lot more interesting and compelling, with deeper mysteries than most of the characters in the main story. Without spoiling too much, very early on you learn that that DLC story takes place in an alternate parallel universe. So you do meet alternate versions of the characters from the main game. Some good characters which are evil and some evil characters which are good. But yeah, I do enjoy various aspects. I enjoyed whatever that happy little place in the cloud was called. That's like your little hub world. Just the cute, quirky things, like your characters get to make food for you and they comment on it. The fact that there's all these, I'm going to use the term social links from Persona. So you can have like character A talk to character B, and maybe characters C, D, E, F, G and H, and they'll have 3 different unique fully voiced cutscenes where they'll develop a relationship, either a good one or maybe it starts bad, or there will be some sort of conflict or whatever it may be, and they'll develop some form of positive or negative relationship and you'll see it expand, and then that means in battle when those characters are near each other they have better stats. So there's a dog thing, some sort of, I don't know, gremlin dog, whatever, that sort of hops around the map and does something, I can't remember. You can have your characters like groom horses, garden and go swimming, and that boosts their social connectedness. What else can you do? Well, there's the shops that open up more out as the story progresses. It's a nice little hub world, and there's loads of like social interconnectedness, and yeah, it's a big epic fantasy adventure with an alright story, some interesting characters, some really good characters, a few crappy ones, very, very, very addictive and compelling gameplay. But I suppose maybe I'm not really saying anything that particularly anoints this particular Fire Emblem compared to the others, because I know there are people who say Three Houses is the best one, Awakening's the best one. Awakening is very good, I can vouch for that. But Engage particularly, I did like, I don't know, I wasn't very kind to the story earlier, but I was very engrossed about the story. I think some of the characters on the way are a bit mediocre, but the overall, maybe this is paradoxical to say, I think the sense of mystery the story creates and the intrigue, and especially because your character wakes up and he's an amnesiac, bit of a cliche trope obviously, but I think all the mystery and the unknown and the questions you want answering about the story, and then the revelations that do happen as the story goes on, they keep it really compelling. And then the character's sense of urgency and the dilemmas that they face, I think it's more the intrigue for your protagonist and then the ongoing characters you meet that's more interesting than the actual big bad or the overall let's save the world malarkey. But there is some really good mysteries there, and the gameplay is a lot of fun, I think. Yes, that's a point I wanted to make. So this is certainly the most technologically advanced Fire Emblem up to that point. However, with it being on the Switch, the technology we have now in 2026, and playing on a Series X or PlayStation 5 or on PC, it can be a bit grating sometimes to see the Nintendo sort of dilapidated technology at work. So you have cutscenes in this game and the characters are floating in a void. There's nothing there. They're just floating. And they're in a location that's just like a circle arena. Imagine, I'll use Tekken for an example, where the characters sort of float and the stage moves around them. It's like this pixelated wall, a flat wall, and they're just on like a bit of flat nothing, like maybe paving stones that just generate limitlessly as they move across them, and then all around them is just a pixelated backdrop. So you never get to see the floor ever in cutscenes, or almost ever, unless it's a pre-rendered cutscene. But the normal ones, they've just got characters, they do a limited bit of animation, they walk in and go, I am the Divine Dragon, I am talking, and then, I don't know, what's he called, Clan, where is he on here, this guy, might go, I like pickles, which he does, and then oh yeah, this guy, he's a bit of a wimp. He'll go, oh no, I'm so scared, and then he'll stop his animation. And so you just have people sort of floating around this void with a very kind of pixelated, fuzzy backdrop that's clearly just a circle, and the characters just floating on a void. There's nothing underneath them. There's no actual 3D aspect, it's just a picture of a surrounding. You never actually get to see the location, you don't see them walking through places. It's all just very, very static. It feels like, if the best way to describe the cutscenes, the non-pre-rendered ones, it's like theatre, live theatre with a painted backdrop. You can enjoy it and you can appreciate the characters and where the story's trying to go on. You can appreciate what the developers have achieved on more limited technology of the Nintendo Switch. However, you don't feel as engaged with it because, haha, engage, it's called Fire Emblem Engage, that's funny, I didn't mean to do that. You kind of feel more like you're watching, like I say, theatre. It feels more like a theatrical performance or a reenactment as opposed to watching the actual cutscene, because it doesn't feel like you're fully there in that world. It feels, in combat it feels fantastic, that feels immersive and it's a lot of fun, but the cutscenes, they did leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, I think. So, some closing thoughts on the game. What do I think of Fire Emblem Engage? Is it worth your time? Well, the combat and the role-playing game aspects, and all the little micromanagement, the social aspects, the immersiveness of the hub world, the optional secrets, and cool extra fights you can do, bonus characters you can have join your team, the overall sense of mystery, and a fantastic, really fantastic soundtrack, which I haven't really touched upon, but it's got some great music. Very good music indeed. I think they all lend credit to the game's strengths. They make it a really fun and compelling fantasy, adventure, role-playing game, tactical strategy game, and I would highly recommend it. I think realistically I'm going to give it around somewhere between an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I know in an earlier video I mentioned that I had like this whole criteria set out for reviews. I don't feel like using that today, but as and when and if I do feel like using that criteria again, then I will. But for this video I am not, because I can't be bothered and I don't want to. I felt like just doing a free spoken unscripted video on my thoughts, because I was thinking about the game earlier in the day and I thought, well, I'll get those thoughts out onto a video, why not? But that was Fire Emblem Engage. I don't try to do my views too much in comparison to other entries in the series, because I just want to sell what that game is for its individual self. But if you think any of that sounds intriguing, I suggest you maybe look up some trailers and gameplay for yourself, and if you're so inclined, give the game a try, because I do think it's a really fun game. It pretty much absorbed my life for like a month. I found it very addictive, very, as I say, I'm definitely going to play it again at some point in the future as well. And yeah, I really like the game. It was one of my favourite games I played last year. My criticisms come from a place of love, not that I think the game's crap. I think it's always important to be honest, especially if you love a game or any piece of media. I think it's good to talk about genuinely what are the things it could have done better, or what did it not quite do so well. But that was Fire Emblem Engage, and I hope you enjoyed the video. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.